Welcome back to MVM, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a review. This one's for Gentes or however you want to pronounce it. It's from Spielworxx, originally released at Essen Spiel 2017, and is now being deluxeified from TMG, and it's on Kickstarter.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with the deluxeified version, it's going to look gorgeous, but it has to be said, this game in and of itself looks fantastic, and better yet, it plays even better.
It is a 2 to 4 player action selection game that takes place in the first millennial BC. Players are trying to populate the Eastern Mediterranean.
Yeah, it's a civilization game. You're going to be doing a number of different things with advancements, training people, building buildings out in there to advance your civilization over 3 eras.
Let's talk first about the components. You have a game board in the center. The game board's broken into a couple different regions. In the center, you have all the different locations. You're going to be building cities into these locations. Once they're occupied forever in the game. They may give you a one-time bonus. The more you build into a region, the more bonuses you may get. Around the board, you're going to have different sections that have tiles. This is kind of the worker placement aspect to the game, or you called it kind of a reverse
worker placement. It's action selection, but as you take these tiles, it's going to feel a little like worker placement because you're effectively locking people out from taking those actions because they were doing something else on the prior turn.
There are 6 rounds in the game. When you hit very specific markers, you're going to use a new deck of civilization cards. These cards get better and better as you go. It'll also allow you to remove some cubes from your timeline at the top of your player board. Your timeline is basically how many actions you get to take over the course of that round. There's no set number of turns within a round. Players are going to keep playing until they run out of actions to be able to take.
Yeah, or run out of time, which we'll get to in a minute, but this is probably the most unique aspect of this game.
So each player is going to start with $20 in front of them. That's going to allow them to be able to take specific actions on the board. They're going to start with their player board in front of them, all 6 of their cities. Some of their timelines are going to be blocked out from cubes, and then they're going to start with an X number of people. Your people are your different types of persons that you're trying to influence through the course of the game. You have a soldier, a scholar, a noble, a priest, an artisan, and then a merchant. Each of these are going to fluctuate through the course of the game. The higher they are on the track, the more flexibility you have with playing civilization cards. But you need to note that each of these tracks can bump into each other. So your noble and your artisan can never pass one another, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool. These guys are effectively the resources in the game because Jeremy said to play cards out of your hand, you have to have certain levels of each of those characters. So as they meet, you're going to have to adjust that depending on the next cards that you might acquire because the cards through the eras will change vastly and you're going to have to sort of fluctuate each of those scales.
On the left and right side of your player board, you're going to have a temple location and an oracle location. These are tied in very specifically to the regions that you place your cities. They're going to give you abilities through the course of the game from building into those regions.
Yeah, you'll basically build in that region. You'll get to place a cube in one of those that you can spend to sort of cheat or break the rules from time to time.
So the game takes place, like I said, over 6 rounds. Each round is broken into 2 different phases. The beginning of the phase is called the Heyday Phase. The end of the phase is called the Decline Phase. Now, it's very important to understand that the Heyday Phase is basically the round or the section where each player is going to be taking all their actions. The Decline is kind of like the cleanup at the end of the round. So during the Heyday Phase, here's what you get to do. You get to do one of many different types of actions. We're going to walk you through most of them.
Yeah, so this is going to revolve around all of the action selection spaces on the board. And the easiest one to start with is the tax collector. This one doesn't have any tiles, and therefore it's not going to be blocked for any player.
It's the only place that doesn't have a tile.
It's the only place like that. This is where people are going to go to collect money. There's 2 spots. One to get $4, one to get $8. Now, both of those are going to take a variety of different times.
So everything in the game revolves around time. Spending time means that it's going to fill up your timeline. Once your timeline is filled with tiles, whether it be the action tiles or timeline tiles, that's going to signify the end of your Heyday Phase. And you're out for the rest of the round, and the other player is going to play until they're done.
Right. This is where it feels like a worker placement game because depending on what you take, you're burning through your round.
So let's talk about what these tiles actually look like. On the left-hand side of every tile is the cost of that tile. On the right-hand side shows you how much time. So in this case, it costs $4 to the bank, but it also requires me to spend 2 time. How that works is this. The first thing that has to happen is this has to physically fit on my timeline. If it does, I have to then pay time for it. Time comes in 2 varieties. And this is a double-sided tile. On one side is 1 time, on the other side is 2 time. You as a player get to decide how you spend your time.
Right.
You can either spend a double-sided 2, 2 or have 2 1 tiles, and that's extremely important for understanding the heyday or the decline phase of a round.
Right, and before we get to that, in the heyday phase, what it's going to do is potentially burn through your round quicker. If you take 2 1s, that might benefit you in the decline, but it's going to give you fewer things to do immediately. The next spot is the next simple spot.
Yeah.
This one is the only tile that doesn't require any time,
Yep.
and this is the start player marker.
Yep.
So you're going to take this, you will get $2, but you'll be the first player in the next round.
And again, that will go onto your player board. Anytime you take one of these tiles, remember it has to fit on your timeline specifically. Down here you have the Scribe. The Scribe allows you to collect cards into your hand. Now, there's a variety of different Scribe tiles down here. They all have different varying monetary values you have to pay, and they also have a number of different time that you have to pay. We'll just pick one in general. This one here cost me $6, but it only requires 1 time. Again, this will go on my board with 1 time. Looking at this though, there's a variety of different actions that you can take for spending $6. So you're always going to look at how much you've spent on that action. The next thing you do is you look down here and you see the number 6 in a variety of different areas. You can take 1 through 3 cards with almost any of these tiles. The cards that you get to pick from depend upon how much money you spent and where you're deciding. So if I take this one, I can take 1 card from anywhere down. If I take this 6, I can take 2 cards from here down. And then if I pick this 6, I can take all 3 of these cards. So it really depends on what cards you want.
Exactly, and as if you couldn't figure this out, as era cards populate this bottom of the board, they're going to come on from a certain side, so they're going to cycle down.
Yep.
So that it makes sense when you go really high, you can get some of the newer cards.
So the Scribe allows you to collect those cards. At the start of the game, each player is going to draft 2 cards in their hand, but you're going to be playing these through the course of the game, so you want to refill your hand up to be able to get a number of cards into your tableau. Now, the Chronicler is going to allow you to actually play those cards, and again, you're going to pick one of these tiles from the Chronicler spot, pay that money, put that tile on your board, pay that time, but then you get to play any one of these cards. Now, there's some prerequisites on playing these cards.
Yeah, the prerequisites on the cards is where the philosopher space comes in. This is where you're going to be manipulating the people on your board, the various ones that Jeremy talked about. For instance, this one here is going to require 3 priests and 1 merchant. So I need to have manipulated that on my player board in order to get this down on my tableau.
Yeah, some of the cards also require you to have specific locations occupied. In this case, I have to have one of my cities on an oracle place on any of the oracle spaces in the regions. When you play that card, a number of things happen. First thing that happens is you may collect a number of victory points, depending if that card has any victory points attached to it. Some of them may give you immediate bonuses, like this one will give me a merchant the moment that I play it. Some of them may have their own specific action spots where you can take an action on your particular card. Some of them will give you abilities during the decline phase. Some of them will give you ongoing abilities, so every time you do something, you collect something a little bit more.
Yeah, it's basically like cards in any good Euro. When you add it to your tableau, they might have ongoing effects, immediate effects, all sorts of different things, even end-of-game scoring.
And the last thing that you're going to do is you're going to look at your entire tableau that you've already previously built. You're always allowed to score any one symbol. There's 4 different possible symbols in here, and you're going to score just 1 point for any one of those symbols. But the more symbols that you've played through the course of the game, those are cumulative. So I've already pre-placed this in a previous round. I would score 1 point for this card, 1 for this symbol, and then every other of that type of symbol that I've scored. So there are some benefits to being able to plan and buy cards accordingly.
Yeah, it brings in a bit of a set collection thing and even somehow ties into the synergies between the cards.
So David said that you have to have your people in specific locations. To have your people in specific locations, you have to go to the philosopher. Again, all of these tie into a specific amount of money that you have to spend and a specific amount of time. These work very similar to the civilization cards. When you buy from these, depending upon the amount of money that you spend is the location that you're allowed to modify your people. So if I spent $4, I can get any guy or I can get 2 guys from this location down.
Exactly. You're always ever going to take 1 or 2 moves there.
Yeah.
Unless you have a little bit of an ability that lets you take an additional one from one of your cards.
And those will cycle out as well depending upon the ones you activate. And note as well that when you move these guys, they can never cross one another. So if you activate one that moves one into its location, it's going to push the other guy over.
Yeah, and it's really important to also remember there's some cards that have manipulation there. So you might put something down that moves your scholar.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to move down your philosopher, but it's going to
It's
anyway.
mandatory in that case, yeah. The last main action selection space is the ability to be able to build new buildings into the game. There's a variety of different ones. You have temples, oracles, trade houses, and then these are wilds. Again, they all cost a different amount of money. They all cost a different amount of time. When you collect these, you're going to place it on your board with the time, and then you get to take one of your cities and place it into that specific area. So I have to place on a temple. You can pick anywhere that you wish to go. When you place it, you collect the bonus underneath of it. In this case, I can put a cube onto my temple. But the trick here too is that if you have previously placed locations in that same city, those will all key as well.
Right.
Or in that same region.
Exactly. This is a big part of the game where you're looking at a lot of these symbols and trying to sort of make them work for you the way you want to. And this will become much clearer in the decline phase when we talk about that. In fact, right before we talk about the decline phase, there's a few more stacks of tiles to talk about in the Heyday phase that will come into play. These are objectives that will be met throughout the game, usually within the Heyday phase, that you're going to take. They graduate down in value, but the first person to play 8 cards in front of them is going to be able to score some bonus points. The first person to actually meet up all of their people, the cubes on their board, are going to get one. And then the first person to play 6 buildings out on the board is going to be able to claim one of those.
Before we get into the decline phase, I do want to talk very briefly about the hometowns. This is another place where you can build buildings. Again, they all correlate to the different types of places you can build. When you build locations in here, you get to choose, no matter which column or row you build into, to activate any one region. So if you have a lot of things in red, you can activate every single building that you have there. Plus, depending upon the row you're in, they give you ongoing abilities, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool too, because unlike the decline phase, building in one region is going to benefit you here, but building in the decline phase might benefit you by building in a variety of different locations. So it's going to give people an opportunity to take different routes to their points in that respect.
There's a couple key things that happen during the decline phase. The first, you're going to shift the first player marker over to whoever took the starting player tile. They'll be the first player in the next round. Then you're going to clean up your time track. This is probably the most important thing. As we mentioned, through the course of the game, you can be taking 2 times to be able to do things, which means you're going to have more actions during the round. All of your single tiles are going to be pushed off. All of your action tiles are going to be put back onto the board, but all of your double tiles will stay on your board and simply get flipped over to their single side, meaning you're going to have less actions on the next round.
Yeah, so effectively, when you take one of those double time tiles and use it that way, you're buying time from the future, if you will, to spend it in the current round. So just, you need to remember that for sure.
The turn marker will advance. If you cross one of these areas here, you're going to remove 1 cube, meaning you have more actions in the next round. Also, it could introduce an entirely new stack of civilization cards. Another key thing that happens during the civilization card, during the decline phase, is that each player is allowed to score 1 and 1 building only in each of the regions that they may have a house. So if you have spread out through the course of the game, you're going to be getting bonuses during the decline. Plus, any civilization cards that key off decline will give you a bonus during this round as well.
Right, so then after the decline phase, you're going to go right back to the Heyday phase of the next round. You're going to do this, like Jeremy said, over 6 rounds with a couple spots that open up more opportunity for more actions each round.
At the end of the game, you're going to do a quick final scoring. Of course, you're going to keep any points that you've collected through the course of the game. You're going to get 1 victory point for every $10 you have. Any cubes you have located in your oracle or temple, which we didn't talk about, will give you a victory point. Any tiles that were a double tile that are going to only get flip over during the decline are going to give you negative points. This is the trick. That last round of the game, you don't want to be doing any double actions or double time actions because they're going to give you negative points depending upon a scale. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to score any victory points that you have in your hand that you didn't get to play. This is pretty cool. If you collect a lot of cards at the end of the round, you have the ability to obviously play them through that last round, but if you don't, you can check to see if you had met the objectives on the card.
Right.
If you could have played them, you score half those victory points. If you didn't or couldn't be able to play them because you didn't have the right people in the right location, you lose half those victory points.
Right, that can really inform the actions you choose in that last round, because you might want to play some cards out onto the table to score some of those points, but just keep in mind that's the one thing that's going to basically be given to you for free at half of the value at the end of the game.
Yeah, so let's talk about the review itself. There's a lot of things we didn't go over for obvious reasons. The hometown stuff is pretty difficult to explain on camera. You really have to be there to talk about it. Also, during the decline phase, we didn't really talk about if you have over 3 cards in your hand, you're going to start with extra time on your board, which is bad. It kind of limits people from being able just to go collect all the cards they want to collect and then play them through the course of the game. Which is,
yeah, it's safe to say there is a lot to do in this game.
Yeah.
It's fairly simple turn to turn, but the complexity, like any good Euro, comes in all the variety of things that you can do. And like Jeremy said, the hometown section is almost a game in and of itself in terms of how this works and how it unlocks some maybe special abilities that you can take.
So what do you think of it? I mean, do you like it as a game?
I do. I'll admit right now, when I saw this game originally, when it was, pictures started popping up from SN, I wasn't sure. It didn't look like it might be a game for me. But then when we played
Is
it
it just because of the graphic design and the art? Like the initial appeal of it?
A little bit, but then seeing the art and the graphic design in person feels completely different to me.
Yeah.
I think largely it was the box. I wasn't sure what this image was going to mean to me.
Yeah.
It felt like lineage and things like that, like a family tree sort of thing going on. But playing it and the mechanics are really what make this game beautiful.
Yeah.
Like the way these cards work, which I'm sure we explained poorly, but once you play this game, you understand how you can acquire these cards, how you can activate some of these people up at the philosopher spot is really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the time aspect of this game is brilliant. Being able to select these tiles to be able to do actions, but also requiring you to spend time, but not only just to spend time, but to spend them in a novel way where you're really deciding, if I spend something as a 2-time, how's it going to affect me in future rounds? Is it going to allow me to take extra rounds? Or even if I flip it over as at a 2 or a 1, do I get anything extra from this round? Will I be able to extend my turn out further?
And one other thing I want to mention too is what you can't appreciate until you experience the games. Like I said, it feels like a reverse worker placement game, but even more intense interaction than you'd expect in a worker placement game, because in a worker placement game, someone takes a spot, it's gone. That spot usually does one thing. In this, there's a variety of levels that these spots do. So I might go here first and decline to go here to play a card, but in the meantime, Jeremy takes the tile that lets you play the card for the lowest amount of cost and the lowest amount of time. I still need to play a card, but now I'm stuck paying either more money or more time.
Which is deadly. Yeah.
So it feels a little bit more interactive that way, because you can really feel the sting of that a little bit more than not just being able to do it.
Yeah, there's a great amount of variety in the game too, and flexibility, especially with buying the philosophers with this track up here and the track for the civilization cards. You can really kind of tailor the game and tailor your civilization cards depending upon which of these actions you take and which cards you take. And you can also screw yourself over if you take too many cards at one particular time that you can't play.
Right, and speaking of cards, the variety here is incredible.
They're all different.
They're all unique cards, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
I love the graphic design on these cards. All of the artwork in here has kind of a cave painting feel to it, and I really like every one of these has a different picture on them. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I've played this 3 times now. In each game, the strategy has been completely different. One game I went completely for strategy cards, or civ cards, and they bit me in the butt. One time I went for getting my guys all together against you, and it worked out well because it gave me greater flexibility.
Yeah.
Plus I went for these abilities over here, the Oracle and the Temple, which allowed me to kind of modify my people and modify some virtual people that I was allowed to use, which we didn't really get into.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but safe to say, the Oracle and the Temple allow you to a lot more flexibility.
And that's just from
in the
building
game.
buildings in the game.
Yeah, you just put those buildings out there. You're going to get some abilities to ditch a cube in order to sort of bend the rules, maybe even break them a little bit, to make it a little easier to do all the other things you need to.
So that is Gentes or however you
Let's
pronounce
say
it.
Gentes, I think.
We'll say Gentes. I'm going to say Gentes just
All right.
to be different. From Spielworxx, it is 2 to 4 player game. It's being deluxified from TMG. It's on Kickstarter right now. If you guys have questions, make them in the comments below. We'll answer them for you. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.